Hi there, and welcome to the Salted Pepper, where we cook for real life using real food and we keep it real simple. And today we are going to make a strawberry basil preserves in the Ninja Foodi. Just a few ingredients and it's super quick to make. So let's get started. First thing we're gonna do is turn the Ninja Foodi on, and we're gonna hit the sear saute and high is fine and hit the start button. Now what I have here is 1 pound of strawberries that I removed the tops from and cut into quarters. So they're about a 1/2 inch pieces or so. We're just going to dump those in to the bowl of the Ninja Foodi. It's about 3 cups of strawberries, which would be equivalent to one of these containers that you can find in the grocery store. The other thing we're gonna add in is 1 cup of white sugar. We want to add in 1 tablespoon of lemon juice. Now I am using fresh squeezed lemon juice because I'm not going to can these. These are just going to go into 2 jars for my own use. They'll be stored in the refrigerator, so I don't need to make sure that I get to a certain acid level. However, if you wanted to make a batch that you were going to can in a hot water bath, you could do that, but you would want to make sure that you use lemon juice out of the bottle. This is one of the times when I would recommend getting a prepackaged product versus the natural product, because lemons vary in acidity quite a bit. So you want to make sure when you're canning that you have the right acid level so you don't grow any bacteria. So while this is safe to do here because we're not going to can it, I'm not going to store it out of the refrigerator. If you wanted to do that, which you can, just use a packaged product of, like the real lemon that comes in a little jar. So this is 1 tablespoon of lemon juice. And then the apple. So normally when you're making a jelly, a jam, or a preserves, you want it to be a little thicker. You want to have, something that's spreadable when you put it on your toast or on your biscuit or whatever you're making with it. So in order to do that without using a packaged product, which is pectin, we are going to use an apple. This is a Granny Smith apple. We're only going to use probably half of it though. And it has natural pectin in there, so that will help thicken up everything and give us the pectin that we need. And the flavor's delicious. You can't tell that it's apple, but it just adds a little extra fruity flavor. So definitely do that. Now, real quick, before I add this in and we get started under pressure, let me just talk real quick about the recipe and how I adapted this recipe. So this is an American test kitchen recipe, so it is approved for canning purposes. Their recipe is 3 times the volume that I'm doing here because I'm not canning it and I just want a couple jars for my immediate use. So if you wanted to triple this recipe, you can, and I will leave those instructions in the post on my website for this video. But real quick, I'll go over it. You would use 1 whole Granny Smith apple, 2 tablespoons of lemon juice that comes in a container in the grocery store. You would use 3 pounds of strawberries and 3 cups of sugar. I don't recommend putting in the basil if you're going to can it. I probably wouldn't create a problem, but again, canning is one of those activities that I really suggest that you follow a tested recipe. And America's Test Kitchen has a tested recipe. It's very similar to this. Okay, I'm starting to hear this, the pot kind of get hot and sizzle up a little bit. So I'm gonna use my mix and chop, which I love to use. We're gonna break up these strawberries some. So I'm just gonna go down and just push and twist. So we're kind of getting the sugar distributed. We're gonna let the juice from the strawberries come out because we're not adding any other liquid. And we need to come up to pressure on this because we're gonna pressure cook this for a few minutes. So I wanna give the strawberries some time to release their juice because that will help us build the pressure that we need. And by breaking them up, there's more surface area and they will release the juice a little bit quicker. Plus, you don't want 1/4 of a strawberry when you're going to spread it on your toast. You want them to be a little bit smaller than that. All right, that looks good. So we'll just let that continue to cook for a few minutes while I get the apple done. So I just have a little paring knife. I'm gonna go down the center. Like I said, I only need half of this apple. So I'm gonna go ahead and put some lemon juice on this so that it doesn't brown up before I can cut it up to eat it as a snack. Now the apple, we're not going to chunk it up. I mean, I guess you could. If you wanted some apple in your preserves, you could certainly do that. But what I'm going to do is grate it in there. And I think by grating it, again, you have more surface area. You're probably releasing more of the pectin. So just with a normal grater, I'm just going to go in here and just grate this apple. This strawberry preserves, oh my gosh, it tastes so good. It's just perfect. My mom is a huge canner, so she's always making jams and jellies and different things. And the other day, my husband and I used up the last that she had given us. And I was at the grocery store, and I found these strawberries for $1. I mean, that was such a great deal. So I think I bought like, I don't know, 12 pounds of them. And I promptly came home and started playing around and made this version of strawberry preserves. And it was so delicious that I wanted to share it with you guys. So I'm just coring the apple, getting that hard part out, peeling it with a paring knife, and then shredding it. It's super easy to do. All right, one more piece. You do want to use a Granny Smith apple and not a sweeter apple because of the amount of pectin that is in the Granny Smith. Another kind of apple might not work as well. All right, perfect. Okay, so let's talk about the basil. I have 3 different types of basil here. Now you can use any kind of basil that you like. I've got the regular sweet basil that we're all used to seeing. And I did want to show you guys that when I went out to the greenhouse to get the basil, I forgot to water it yesterday, and so it was looking a little bit droopy. Even these top leaves look like these bottom leaves. But don't worry about that. It's going to rehydrate fine. So if you have some basil that you have and it looks like this, it just needs some water. So cut the stem off, stick it in some water, and it will brighten up in no time at all. Now this is some of the basil that I picked from the garden, and it stayed hydrated. So I'm gonna use that and let this rehydrate. The best way to store basil is actually on your counter in a jar of water. You don't want the leaves to get into the water, but you want the stems to get into the water. And then you can also put a plastic bag over top. It creates like a little greenhouse effect, and that will keep your basil going for quite some time. Now, another thing about basil that I found out, I love basil and I love cooking with fresh herbs, and I think it's super expensive when you buy fresh herbs at the store all the time. So if you're not going to use a lot of basil, but you happen to get like maybe 1 basil plant, the only thing you need to do to grow more from that basil plant, first of all, harvest it often. So, clip it often, even if you're not going to use it. That's going to encourage more growth on the basil plant you have. But then who wants to waste the basil once you clip it if you're not going to use it within, a couple days? Well, you don't have to worry about that, because if you put it in the water, like I did, it will actually root itself. So these are all little roots. And now I can plant this in the ground or in a pot that I keep outside, because basil grows great in a pot, and I will have another basil plant, and it does well. In fact, this one was planted in the garden from a cutting like this. So I have some Thai basil right here, and that also has rooted, so I can now have another Thai basil plant. And we also have a different kind of basil that I have not seen too often. It's called pesto basil, and it just has like a lighter green color, and it's got a little white on it. It's very, very pretty. You can use 1 or all 3 in this recipe. It really doesn't matter. What I'm going to do is go ahead and take off the leaves of the basil, and probably you only need about 1/4 cup of chopped basil for this recipe. And if you add a little more, it'll just be a little more basil-y. If you add less, it'll be less basil-y. No worries on that. If you don't want to add in the basil, you don't need to. That's not an ingredient that has to be in here. So this is the Thai basil. It's one of my favorites. It just smells Oh my gosh, it just smells amazing. It's got almost like a little licorice smell to it. I love it. And then this is that beautiful pesto basil, which is really gorgeous. I'm just gonna pop off these leaves. Now we've got some boiling going on, so I'm gonna go ahead and go back in and get this chopped up just a little bit more. All right, so let me just get a few more pieces, and I'm just getting a little bit of each one. But again, you can use one or you can use no basil. But it really did add a great flavor. We enjoyed it quite a bit. All right, so that is enough. That's gonna give me about 1/4 cup. Now, I am going to keep these because a little bit later, I'm gonna be making some lemon basil scones. They are absolutely delicious, and that's what we're gonna serve our strawberry jam on. And you'll get to see them at the end of the video because I'm gonna make them and we're gonna taste the strawberry preserves with the scones. All right, so I'm just gonna get my chef's knife and I'm just gonna roughly chop through the basil. Now, ordinarily, I always recommend putting in fresh herbs at the end of cooking, but because I want the basil flavor to infuse throughout the strawberries and infuse with the preserves, I am going to put it in now before pressure cooking. All right, so that's about 1/4 cup. Put that in. Give it a little stir. Now we've got plenty of liquid here. It looks perfect. So we just put on our pressure lid. Make sure the black valve is to the seal. We're gonna go to high pressure and we're gonna go for 5 minutes. Hit start. Now, the thing about doing the strawberry preserve recipe under pressure is no matter what you do at the end, let it completely naturally release the pressure. This is super important. I did try to do a 10-minute natural release thinking that everything would settle down. It did not. When I flipped the valve to vent, I had strawberry preserves swimming in my air. So you don't want that. So definitely let it naturally release all of the pressure before you open up the lid, okay? Now it's gonna come up to pressure really fast because that mixture was boiling already. So I can already see some steam coming out and I can hear it and it's already under pressure. So literally that took a minute. And we'll go 5 minutes and then we'll naturally release the pressure. I'm not sure how long that's gonna take, but I'm guessing somewhere between 15 and 20 minutes. And then we'll get it put in our jars and in the refrigerator to cool. So it took about somewhere between 15 and 18 minutes for the red button to depress. Honestly, I wasn't standing here because I thought it was gonna take a little bit longer than that. But anyway, so now we're up to 20 minutes. But you could have opened it up as soon as the red button depresses. There we go. Now it's still super hot and it's gonna look really liquidy, and that is okay. As it cools, it's gonna thicken up, but it's just beautiful and it smells amazing. So what I'm gonna do, now there's a couple things you could do. You could let it cool. You could sit the whole pot in like an ice bath in your sink and cool it down really quickly. I think what I'm gonna do is put it into these little jelly jars, and then I'm gonna put these into an ice bath to cool down, just so that it cools a little bit faster, because you do need it to cool and set up before you use it. Although right now it'd be great if you wanted to pour it over something as a hot, strawberry syrup. But if you want it to thicken for a preserve, you do need to give it a little bit of time to cool down. All right, so I just have a little funnel here with a wide mouth that I'm gonna make it a little bit easier to put these in. Now keep in mind the glass jar is going to get hot when you put in your hot preserves. So I do have some gloves here if I need them because they will get hot. This should make about 2 of these jars, maybe a little bit more. Looks good though. It smells wonderful. I think I'm gonna tilt the pot here, so let me get my heat resistant glove on. looks like I have a little bit left over. So maybe 2.5 jars this will make. All right, perfect. So I'm gonna put these into an ice bath, let them cool down for a little bit, pop them in the fridge for a couple of hours, and then we're gonna taste it on those delicious lemon and basil scones. All right, so our strawberry preserves had enough time to cool down and gel up. It's a perfect consistency. I think they turned out beautifully. And then I've got this little scone here. This is a lemon basil scone that I made, and I will link to that video right up there because these are super delicious and pair beautifully with the strawberry preserves. So I'm just gonna split these and give our strawberry preserves a taste. Lovely. All right, so let's put some on there. Make sure I get a piece of basil and a nice piece of fruit. All right, perfect. Here we go. That is good. Wow. These two go so nicely together. But the strawberry preserve tastes so fresh. Like sometimes you can overcook your fruit when you're making a preserve and you kind of lose that flavor of the fruit. We do not do that here. It is perfect. So you get a really nice fresh strawberry flavor and the fruit is soft. I think it's a perfect consistency all around. For 20 minutes, making your own preserves, perfect.